Another week of the UNLV All Access podcast. Caleb Herring is here. It's Steve Cofield. Caleb, of course, played quarterback for the Rebels, voice of the Barry Odom radio show, developing web star. What's the name of your new series where you're putting out the short videos? We're trying to put them out on at Steve Cofield and at UNLV All Access. Very impressive production.
Yeah, it's called The Breakdown. That's what I came up with, The Breakdown, with myself, Caleb Herring. Apparently that name is used a lot, but if I use with Caleb Herring, it makes it unique. But yeah, it's called The Breakdown. It's essentially going to turn into breaking down UNLV week to week as it goes, as the season goes, whether it's previewing the next opponent or reviewing some of the big stuff that happened in the game. And then it's going to branch out from there. But yeah, it is my little project, my little to myself at home project that I made time for.
I love it. The people want it. People out there want more and more UNLV access. I think one of the really cool things that developed over the last couple of weeks is UNLV's go-go offense in conjunction with the release of the EA college football game. You play it. You love it. We've got guys all around us on our local ESPN Las Vegas radio show who understand it pretty well. I'm going to have you explain this in a second, but the other day, Brennan Marion, the OC, was asked about the go-go offense being one of the top-picked offenses in the game, and here's where he talks about kind of the background of it and also the need for people to be more creative around college football and coming up with offensive plays.
Using it. I'm starting to see the college teams use it. I guess, without me only running it at the FBS level for one season, a lot of guys haven't seen it yet. They don't know how to really, work through it yet. So, with PFF and all these things that you can track and watch film, now guys will probably sprinkle it in a little bit more, into their systems. But I just think it's a good thing, for football to, be creative and innovative and give the game something new. I didn't study for the SATs. So she threw my game away, and I used to always create plays. And, I was always creating plays, and I'd always tell the coaches plays and stuff. So long story short, this summer, he called me and he said, the EA Sports guy wants your number. They want to ask if they can use the go-go offense and put it in the game. And, talking with EA Sports back and forth has been pretty cool deal, for them to do that. So it's not the exact stuff that we run, but they just sprinkled in some of the stuff that they saw on film last year and put it on there.
Yeah, I was wondering about how much of it they use, because I know coaches are insane about protecting their plays. So I'd be like, what? How much are you going to put in there? But the cool thing is, and you play the game, I didn't realize that when you pick a school to run, if you're in Dynasty or whatever, you can also pick another school's offense. And I guess people have found the go-go. It's gone wild on Reddit, and a lot of people are using the go-go offense, which quite the feather in the cap. I mean, they're video gamers, but whatever. Quite the feather in the cap for a guy who's already been lauded as you really created offensively, and now you've got the video game pumping out UNLV football.
It's cool because it coincides with how people were kind of clamoring for this game, like EA Sports College Football 25, because of with the NCAA and how that game fizzled out back in 2013. It's been a much anticipated release for this game. So for not only the release to be anticipated, but then for the offense to be included and some of the other things that they've done to sort of personalize each university, it almost like when you take a step back and appreciate it, it seems like an impossible task to get that many universities and add some elements of the university to the game. UNLV has like their run out at Allegiant Stadium. Allegiant Stadium looks great, by the way, when it's full in the video game. So you can only imagine. But it's really unique for UNLV to have the go-go. And I was curious as to what it would look like because, when you pick the offense, it says UNLV offense. It's like, I wonder how close to real this will be. And right off the bat, you see some of the formations. It's like, well, that's go-go. I know that. The two running backs on one side, like that's kind of the staple. Like you're in the go-go now when you're doing stuff like that. But there are just bits and pieces. I don't think it was an extensive deep dive breakdown of the go-go. There's some basic concepts that just come from different formations that I think the go-go gives you. I think the one thing that it is missing, you can't prepare for the motions. You like the way that they use motion dynamically, the depth, all those kind of things you can't really mimic in a video game, which is why the offense is so unique and special. But it's cool to hear Marion talk about how he used to create games. There used to be a feature back in the day. I'm dating myself with these games here. But when Madden was like in its heyday, there was a feature called Create Your Playbook. And I was one of the guys like Coach Marion who liked to create plays. Like this is when I was in like high school, middle school. I would create a playbook that was based on my real life coach's playbook, like my high school playbook. I would create it, but on Madden. So that was like how I practiced my plays. Oh, you get creative, freelance and stuff. But just to kind of spark that creativity, because a lot of football is copycat. There's so many things that, I mean, the route tree hasn't changed since 1987, right? Like 1 through 9 means the same thing for a wide receiver in the route tree, right? Cover 2 is cover 2. But it's cool to come across, and every now and then you come across something that's truly innovative, and something as simple as a go-go offense. And I don't want to call it simple, but what it does to defenses is a really a simple trick, but it just throwing that innovative twist in it to make defenses count for their wide receiver count, the strength of the offense count, to throw that off just by your formations, just something that's not traditional, not conventional, but it's just a slight tweak to what the normal play would be, really can go a long way. And I think that's what Coach Marion has done in a lot of ways, is like tweak something that just makes defenses. And I know defenses look, and people that watch the game can, if I say a 3-by-1 formation, you know what that looks like you can see trips to the right, one to the boundary, right? You can see that. But if I told you that your trips was lined up a little bit differently, like one slight move of a guy out into the backfield, and it's like, now that's trips to the boundary still. And it's like, wait, how? And defenses on the field are like, how am I reading this like trips? It's not. It doesn't make sense. And there's so many things like that within the go-go that's like little nuances to formations that are innovative, but really change the narrative of the game. And it was cool that EA put that in there. And I saw some of the gamers react to it. It was kind of funny watching them trying to figure out, like, what is this? How do I defend it? And then now I want to run it. Like, how do I run this and dominate the game with it? But we got that nod in the video game. It's cool.
It's interesting, as Marion said, some NFL people have used some elements of it. Sources tell me that there are Raiders offensive people who are pretty impressed with Marion and, want to meet him, want to pick his brain a little bit. So that's a hell of a compliment. So we could talk offense all day long, and I know it's your cup of tea, and I know this is what most people are interested in when it comes to breaking down what's going on in fall camp. We'll get to the quarterback stuff a little later. I'll make the statement right now. If this defense doesn't improve on last year, and it had some really good elements of the defense, but if it doesn't get better in terms of shoring up the pass defense and deep plays, I don't think they can win 9 games. And I know the coaches know that. I don't know about the 9 games part, but they know they need to get better. And the offseason showed, from a transfer portal standpoint, recruiting standpoint, that they know they need to get better. Now, I always think about the roster, and we were sitting down with Michael Scherer, the DC, today, actually, as we're taping on Tuesday, and I thought this was pretty intriguing from Scherer. And, he's kind of throwing out the things that need to be improved on, and he mentioned attitude. And I'm like, okay, that gets me going a little bit. So I follow up here with Scherer, and he talks about attitude, and it kind of wasn't where I expected him to go.
We weren't very tough. We may have looked like it, but we were tough enough to get through 2/3 of the season. In my mind, I think very tough. I think toughness is an attitude. Caring about the people around you is an attitude. Your desire to learn football, your desire to learn what you're supposed to do, your desire to get better, not only for yourself, but for the people around you, is an attitude.
Interesting, right? I thought most of it was going to be attitude when things aren't going well, but he's talking about attitude on and off the field.
Yeah, there's so many layers to attitude, and it's what I think the way I would describe it, kind of listen to what he was saying, was you can like to play football, but being passionate about football is a different level of commitment to the game, right? Like, you got to eat, sleep, breathe the game in a lot of ways, and it's the way you carry yourself, right? Like, there's certain things that you're going to be competitive about, right? Like, obviously, if it's, you're in between the lines, but are you going to be competitive when it's time to push yourself to your breaking point, right? Are you going to be willing to break yourself down in practice? Are you going to be willing to sell out and lay out for that ball? Even, those practice doesn't really matter. Are you going to be able to do it? Attitude, one of your favorite things, Steve, one of your favorite things that you've been watching in football, the chin scrape block, right? That's attitude. Like, yes, I pancaked you, but is it enough? No. My attitude says I need to finish you off. I need to assert my dominance. I'm going to go ahead and scrape over the top, right? That's attitude. Finishing in the fourth quarter. Like, it's an attitude that I will finish, not that I might finish or I'm going to wait and see what happens. No, I'm going to go make the play happen. And that's the difference, I think, where you talk about winning habits and people that win sometimes, right? You win because you intend to win. And there's a lot of that. I think that you can boil it down to attitude, just depending on how you look at the word. And I think for the most part, like you were saying, the when things go wrong. I think there's a lot of times during the season that things went bad for that last year's UNLV team, and they actually bounced back, which is like, if that's the way you're looking at it, the attitude is fine. Like, that's what you would think. But no, it's like there's a swagger you got to have about yourself where I'm the guy out here. I'm the baddest mofo in the field, and somebody's going to have to knock me off the throne. And I think at times that may have been in question, especially when you look at finishing. And last year, the Rebels, against the three, what I would say, most difficult teams they played all season long, as far as conference, San Jose State, Air Force, and then Boise State, and then Kansas, if you count the bowl game. But those three games, I think, were the toughest games because the strength of who you were, the resolve in how good you were or weren't last year, how much of the season was a fluke, was really tested in those last 3-4 games. Where it's like, are you really who you think you are coming into these games? And I think the attitude of UNLV kind of crept in where it was like, we don't know for sure. We're good and we can compete, and we're confident saying we can compete, but are we supposed to win these games? And I think there was times in those games where you saw a little doubt and the swagger kind of faded a little bit in the face of that competition, because San Jose State is a team with attitude. They, like the way they've been playing the last 3-4 years in the Mountain West, attitude all up and down. Boise State has this kind of arrogance about them with their attitude. It's like, no, we're going to beat you. And that's just how it is. Air Force, even though the Rebels got that win, it's like, we will have your number. We're going to be physical and we're going to beat you down until you submit. And I think down the stretch of the season, that was the way the Rebels looked. Like, they look like, yes, we can compete, but we don't know for sure yet. This is our first time being in this position. We didn't have enough to finish the job. And that's kind of been echoed throughout camp. It's been echoed throughout the offseason that the Rebel players understand finishing is a part of the attitude. Like, I'm not just going to pancake block you. I'm not just going to have the 8-win season. I'm going to finish the job. I'm going to get you a chin scrape. And that's how we're going to finish the season. That's the goal, I think, is chin scrape mentality going across the board for UNLV.
I like Scherer. He kind of comes off as he's a Midwest South guy. He comes off as kind of aw shucks guy, but when you get him going, like you can hear at the beginning of that bite, he's like, "Yeah, we thought we were tough, huh? Yeah, we were tough for 2/3 of the season. It's not very tough." I'm like, okay. I threw the question his way about what you were saying last week, and I probably misinterpreted it on some fronts. But we were talking about the deep shots and retooling the defensive backfield, and they've talked about length. And you brought up speed. Like, sometimes teams are just like, yeah, catch us. Like, we're going to run right by you. So I presented this question to Scheer about rebuilding the defensive backfield, and sometimes maybe it just comes down to speed. He didn't exactly agree.
The other day about the deep shots last year, I know you were really concerned. You mentioned that a bunch of times. And he talked about execution and technique. Sometimes does it just come down to speed, where other teams are like, hey, we're just going to run by you? And have you gotten better in terms of – is that one of the things you wanted to fix?
We've gotten better in terms of speed, athleticism, all that, but no. It comes down to discipline, your eyes, your technique. Do you do what you're supposed to do on the snap? Do I know what I'm supposed to do on the snap? Have I studied enough film to look at the guy's stance and understand, okay, in that stance he's going to run straight, or in that stance, or if he's off the ball, he's probably going to run a short route. If he's on the ball, he might be running deep, and I got to be ready for it. There's so many things that go into it. You don't have to be the fastest player in the world, all right? But you do have to care, and you do have to find ways to outrun your deficiencies, I guess. In this case, you wouldn't be outrunning because you're saying, we weren't fast enough. But there's a lot schematically that you can do to add layers to a defense. But a lot of it comes down to discipline. It comes down to Boise State, I don't know how many deep shots they had, but quite a bit. And a lot of those were man-to-man coverage. And those deep shots were a man back there and nobody else, right? So when it really comes down to that's not athleticism, it's not speed. Heck, a lot of times it was a tight end down there, right? It's all discipline. Do I do my job? Do I trust my teammates to do their job? Do I know my job? There's a lot that comes down to it.
I'll tell you, I almost followed that up because I like the Boise comment, because I thought about the Boise game a lot. And I was going to ask here, hey, the way Boise went at you, does that insult you as a D coordinator? But I was like, let's not get Haas all fired up here. Because I think what Boise did, they did take a bunch of deep shots. They even ran tight ends by people. And then they're like, yeah, we're not going to lean on Ashton Genty early. we're going to go non-conventional and freaking throw over the top, and then Genty's going to bury you. And all that can change. But what do you think about what he said about speed? And really it comes down to you can outwork maybe some deficiencies.
I think that was probably the part I was going to focus on the most. Like there were deficiencies, and maybe speed wasn't the number one, and that's just my eyes looking at it. I thought there were times, and maybe speed makes up for a lot of those deficiencies, right? Like having the wrong first step, your read steps being off as a defensive back, and you get out of position there, you give up your leverage. Speed makes up the difference. Like you can make that mistake if you're fast enough. That's speed kills to me. And I think there's times where you want the fastest guy on the field to be one of your guys. And I hear what he's saying there when you say to make up for the deficiencies, you need to be smarter, your IQ of what this guy is going to run, what these route concepts mean when they're combined together, what that motion is giving me a signal of. Do they give me a lot of jet sweep, or is this just to pull me out of my position? Is this to try to stretch the defense laterally when they send that guy in motion? Those kinds of things can tip you off so that you're in better position regardless. And again, against Boise State was a great example of it down the stretch, because I think that was a challenge that Coach Scherer and the staff had for the defense. And they ended up in a lot of man-to-man coverage. They ended up with a lot of you're by yourself on the big plays. And it was because of the respect for Ashton Genty, who's the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. And that's okay. That's a part of the deal, right? You don't expect it to go that way. You don't expect them to hit just about every play they take for a deep shot. You don't expect them, Boise State, for all of their dominance in the Mountain West all these years, to come out and hit you with 3 or 4 trick plays in the first half, right? Like that's not lost on anybody here. A couple of those were trick plays. Like we had a reverse pass, we had flea flick. Like there's stuff they were doing that was like off tempo, that was off the page, that there was no way the Rebels could have been ready for, like from a film and watching it and being prepped for it. But you got to be able to react to it on the field, and that's where like you said, the IQ, the intelligence of your players comes in. Like, yes, I haven't seen this before, but if I stay true to my keys, it will take me to the play, right? Yes, the action in the backfield is looking like reverse, but my guy's running full speed at me and he's running a post route. I think I should go with him, right? Those kinds of things that your football IQ kind of kicks in and saves the day when everything is flash and flying out there on the field. So there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. And I still stand by there was times on that I thought that the other team just looked faster. And particularly down the stretch, I think Kansas was the big one, where it was like they have some speed out there, and some speed that's going to be returning, but they have some speed out there that you had to count for. That maybe I wouldn't say caught the Rebels off guard, but the little deficiencies that he's talking about, where he's talking about being out of position or not being connected as a defense, you can't recover from that if you don't have next level speed. So there's a bit of both, I think, and I the way they've retooled, I think the way they've learned. Just in the very small sneak peeks that I've gotten in practice, is like they're putting different things together. And I think some of the people they brought in, just with that kind of IQ that they come into the game with, I think will go a long way towards helping the secondary sew things up in particular.
Caleb Herring, Steve Cofield, UNLV All Access Podcast. The Rebels open on August 31st. So as we're taping, game is about 18 days away. Reminder, Barry Odom Radio Show, the first one, will be at Parkway Tavern, Flamingo 215. That'll be on Wednesday, August 28th. So they played a scrimmage on Saturday the 12th. They've got another scrimmage on the 19th. So we're in between the scrimmages. Being out there for a few days, they haven't given out many details on the scrimmage. And as we found out last year, you actually could find out about the scrimmage sometime from the players. So here's Jalen Catalon, who came in. Really impressive dude. Definitely, I can see why they like his communication, and he's a leader as a veteran, has been at Arkansas and then Texas. He starts out talking about positives from the scrimmage, and then I follow up with third downs, because Odom had mentioned something about third downs, and Odom mentioned that they had added more third downs and work on third downs in the Monday practice. So here's Jalen Catalon.
There were some highlights from younger guys that kind of stepped up. Manny Powell was one guy that stood out and made some great plays. Kella Moore, freshman nickel, that did well. And there's a bunch of guys I can name, but overall I felt like both sides had an equal amount of good plays. Still stuff to clean up just like everybody else. We got to work on stuff, but I'm happy how things went for the scrimmage for the first one. I'm excited for the next one.
Odom talked about third down and that he added some third down this practice. I guess he said there were some shortcomings on defense. So
no doubt.
What can you recall?
No doubt. I think for the scrimmage third down, we definitely wasn't the standard as we wanted to play at. It wasn't bad. I think we all fit. I think it was about just making the plays and being there and finishing the play, not just being there and just being present. So I think this emphasis of this practice was just being there in third down, really understanding what the situation, executing, not just being the spot, but actually making the play and, winning the situation. So it's being competitive and creating that edge for the offense and defense to compete. Also what it's all about when it's all said and done. Practice is create situations for offense and defense to compete.
All right, there you go. First introduction on the speaking terms from Jalen Catalan. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, well-spoken guy. Good. He pointed out there's a lot of people that stood out and performed well in the first scrimmage. Really, outside of spring, the first real action that this team, I guess there's people that have been added in the fall, but the first real time they've gone live with each other. So it's interesting to see what he felt and what his thoughts were. And understanding that whatever the outcome was, it wasn't the goal to be satisfied with that scrimmage. I think just listening to him, trying to read between the lines, I think he has an understanding that it was not about having it done and having everything, the finished product together, and then realizing some of the things that they needed to work on. And the connectedness, you could tell that was a theme throughout the practice, because anytime a player says something that the coach said, it's like, yeah, they talked about that. It wasn't just coach talk. This is something that they're actually trying to solidify. Understanding the situation of football. Again, that's a common theme that's been talked about throughout the offseason. As far as football IQ and just having a natural understanding of the game where you don't have to necessarily be told what the situation is. You don't have to, understand the leverage or what the team's trying to get on a third down. You know it, and then you can play to those instincts. And a lot of those third and short, those fourth and short plays that are made are plays that aren't, necessarily on the page. It's not X's and O's that tell you how to make those plays or how to rise up to those moments. It's that natural instinct, that natural IQ that tells you this is what they're trying to do and this is where I need to be, especially on the defensive side. So I like that the players are understanding the situational side of football. And that's something that I think Coach Odom, I think he had that sound a little bit later, talks about of being intentional with those things and with those elements of practice. And in that case, what Jalen was talking about, the scrimmages, it's like those things are important to understand, not just to practice them and to have them on the script, but to understand that portion of practice for those moments and to take them as they are. So that way the game situations are not as hectic or as heightened as far as the pressure on those moments.
Now, if you notice, Catalan mentioned some personnel. Manny Powell may be an unknown name to many people who are fans of UNLV football. So he's new to the program. He's a young transfer recruit who is actually from Arkansas, was at Arkansas. And he's getting a lot of work because right now Marcel McDuffie's a little dinged up. When I asked Michael Scherer earlier today about McDuffie, he said he'll be fine. He knows he's got great experience in Jackson Woodard and McDuffie, but I think they also realized that last year they were really fortunate. Those guys never got hurt. And the other thing is, especially Woodard, they're playing on special teams all the time. They have to get a blow at some point. So they're trying to develop Manny Powell. And by the way, Manny Powell came in and spoke for about 10 minutes, which I can't guarantee he's getting playing time, but you would think if he's speaking to the media, he's getting playing time. Scheer mentioned Manny Powell as one of the guys they're trying to develop as a 2. Your guy, Blessing, Alu, Tulia. Wait, hold on. Tui Alamotu. You jump me.
There you go.
And then the other one is Charles Correa, who's a true freshman. And I'm going to go back to my comments about Charles Correa. And I'm not saying you just look at a football dude's body and you're like, that's it. He was one of the guys I saw in the spring, and I was like, my Lord, that is a different looking dude than they've had at linebacker. Like thick trunk, legit 230, probably closer to 240 now. But he went out of his way to mention him as maybe the third option at linebacker. So you can see what they're developing behind McDuffie and Woodard.
Right. We talked about kind of the potential for a linebacker university for like with Coach Odom, his experience as a linebacker, as a player, as a coach. Coach Scheer, obviously his career as a linebacker under Coach Odom. And then that's kind of the lens he sees the game through. And even before Coach Odom came to UNLV, there's kind of this history of solid linebackers going back even to Javen White, where UNLV had some linebacker depth, where they had guys that were standouts. And I think that's maybe we're double down on that linebacker notion, especially with the play of Woodard and McDuffie last year, the guys that they're recruiting and kind of the football sense of the guys. You're right. Although I don't want to frame it like I just stare at these guys' bodies and just understand exactly what I'm looking at all the time. I try not to stare. But these dudes, you can see it. And it was the case with Woodard last year for me. And I could, that's a little bit what you're saying here with Correa is like, you look at a guy and you're like, that's a football guy. Like there's something different. The way he moves, the way he carries that weight, the way he carries that size. And then in the case of Woodard last year, it was like he just is always in the right spot, it seems like, in the practices. And then lo and behold, he has one of the best seasons as a linebacker, UNLV history. He's getting all sorts of preseason watch list nods at the position. So, but you can see it. You could see football guys. And I think they've got some guys at that linebacker position that are just football guys.
And really, when I'm talking about what they look like, it's more of the developmental thing. Like they're a little advanced for their age. Because I'll give you the opposite example. It's not an opposite, but it doesn't always guarantee it when you look at a guy's physique. Like he has the look.
Yeah.
Osei Agbase, when he came in from Crespi and he was an Arroyo recruit, had that projectability at 6'4" and 235. He's not 235 anymore. He's probably 255 or 260. And I thought this was really cool. Talking to Scherer, and I guess I should be doing what other people do. Scherer told me, but I was asking him just in general, because I was talking about the different levels. We talked about D-backs, we talked about linebackers, and I'm like, all right, D-line, you'll hear me reference Ricky Logo, but I get to, like, I just want to hear from the defensive coordinator what defensive lineman to this point has impressed him early in camp.
Is Osei the kind of guy you can kind of hold up to the younger guys? Maybe through a couple of years they're not playing, maybe they're struggling a little bit, and go, give it time. Look, he's been here forever, and now look at the player he is.
Yeah, but more so than time, I think it's work ethic. It's a product of everything he's done off the field. Osei, I could be wrong, but I'm going to go and say it because I don't think I am. I think Osei is the strongest person on the team. I think he is. Somebody's probably going to get mad at me about that, one of the other players. But I do. From what I see, I think he's the strongest player on the team in the weight room. And it's, how can you connect the weight room to the field? What are your deficiencies? And if you're not connecting the weight room to the field, let's say like maybe last year, Osei, he was almost there, but he had some work to do. What do I need to do to make that happen? And I think he worked his butt off in all areas on the field, weight room. What are my deficiencies? What do I need to get better at? Got better at it, and then his nonstop motor makes him go. So, yeah, you could. Hey, wait, time, but really it's a work thing.
I think that ties back into what he was talking about with attitude, right? Like the things that you do that display that you have the right attitude, the right mindset to focus on your deficiencies in the weight room. Like, okay, you're good. I'm going to go back again in time, but you're good at power clean. But what's your squat max, right? Like those 3 Olympic lifts that were, the gospel for football players back in the day. You can squat a lot, but what's your lateral movement like, right? Like how does that work? How's your flexibility, right? Can you get skinny when you're rushing as a pass rusher? Nope. You're just a big body that gets stuck in gaps, right? You're easy to double team. That's a thing, right? I don't know how it's hard to double team somebody, but that's D-line. That's your technique that you're supposed to learn. Can you put your strength on the field? And there's guys that I've known in my career that can move a house if you lay them on a flat bench, right? But they couldn't get past, the most basic inside zone technique for the offensive line. And it's like, well, how does that weight room not translate? You spend an offseason focusing on that and how to make your strength relatable, how to make your motor go between the lines. And you come out an improved player. And I think that's the case. And that's what Coach Scherer is talking about there. That dedication in the weight room, that dedication in the offseason to make those improvements. Yeah, he might be the strongest guy. There's clips of him in the weight room that UNLV posts up on the social media. He's a workhorse in the weight room. But I think what you're seeing with him, it's this from the spring to now, you're seeing the transition of all of this stuff that he's working on in the weight room transferring to the field. And especially when he can do it in spots. He's not required to be on the field for every play of every series and every down. You see a guy that has a motor that can be a problem for a lot of offensive linemen.
Yeah. Interesting, because Ricky Logo was in at the end of last week. And by the way, if people are looking for more videos and audio, we're trying to post them as quick as we can. So if you go to Cofield and Company on YouTube, going to try to put up more of the full press conferences. Now, when I'm there, I break it up into little parts. So we'll put them together so you can hear the whole thing. You go to UNLV All Access on Twitter. You go at Steve Cofield, at Caleb Herring _, and we're putting out videos. Also, a lot of videos pop up now on ESPN Las Vegas on Instagram, and we'll work on TikTok. Okay, we gotta get to that one as well, and some YouTube Shorts. But there's audio and video like pocketed all over the internet now, so we're trying to push out as much as possible. So much good stuff, so many good features. I just got to mention this. A former UNLV player on the defensive line was at practice a couple of days ago, and it was Eliel Ahimere, right? And Eliel was another guy. He worked, man, and he got to a point those last couple of years on the defensive line. I think you respected not only his strength, but he was mean.
Yep.
And I was talking to him off the record, but I'll bring it out. I'm like, there's really no one left because they turned over the roster so much. There's not many guys left from your era. Well, Osei is one of them. And Osei walked over to say hi to him. And Eliel even said it. He's like, Osei's been lifting. Osei's been eating. Like that's how much bigger he looks. Yeah. And Logo said something interesting because I always rave about you'll hear during the game. It'll be the 6 minutes left in the game. And I'm like, Osei's in now at this important time, or Keith Connolly's in now. And Logo sort of straightened me out on that. He's like, well, late in the game, there are times where you got to create havoc on the end. And if, Osei and Connolly are some of those guys, then yeah, in spite of the fact that they may have played 6 plays up until, say, 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Caleb, they're out there trying to chase you guys down.
Yeah. And that's, to me, that's like, one, it's the ultimate sign of trust, right? That not just trust that the guy can do it. Because, yeah, you probably say he's a good pass rusher, but trust that for 3.5 quarters, he stayed engaged with what was going on. Right, that this guy's been on the sideline, not pouting, not sulking, but understanding that that's maybe where he's going to make his money. That's maybe where his bread is buttered. In those situations where it's a pass, most teams are going to pass in this or whatever case. So I want you to just go get after the quarterback, full battery. You're ready to go. Your legs are fresh. Go get them, and then you shine in those moments. And oftentimes last season there was guys like Osei and Connolly would step up in those moments and come up with big plays. We're like, where the heck did that come from? Like. All of a sudden, this guy comes in, he gets 3 sacks. And you probably got people in the stands thinking, like, why doesn't he play every rep? It's like, well, the reason is so that he could be ready for this rep, right? Like, so the depth can kick in when it needs to. And that's like that coaching touch where we talk about how a coach and the rotation and the depth can have an impact that may seem small on the outcome, but that little subtle thing of understanding his guys and the way they can rotate in those situations. Coach Logo obviously does a great job of it. Coach Odom and the system that they run with the 2 spots at practice to get guys ready to be in that position. But then for the position coach to just say, you know what, I'm going to push this button right now. I'm going to put Osei in the best position possible so he can let his talent shine in those moments. And obviously everybody's goal is to become an every down person. But I don't know about anybody on a defensive line at any level that is an every down for 4 quarters type of guy. Right. You get Aaron Donald, one of the best to ever do it. He'll come out for a couple of plays here and there. Right. There's some 3rd and longs where he's not going to be the guy. But when it's crunch time, you better believe he's going to have his hand in the dirt causing havoc up front. So that's where you want. You want your defensive line to be able to rotate and have those moments, especially down the stretch with fresh legs.
As an example, and I don't know if people saw this on Twitter, but again, up at Steve Cofield, up at UNLV All Access, charting who may be the 1s and 2s. I was making a call on the 1 defensive line, 4 defensive linemen, and I tracked what the 4 backups had done experience-wise, and the 4 backups combined had played 910 plays last year. I mean, that's the second unit, and then there's another unit behind them that's going to have 2 or 3 guys who can contribute. So let's close out with some offense. And speaking of depth and experience, it's the O-line. And I'm always fascinated to talk to Caleb about this, and Brennan Marion discussed it. And we've seen these stories develop over the years. The role of kind of controlling things out there and also making the calls. And when you have an experienced quarterback, like when Brumfield played, then the line had it a little easier. When Brumfield went out at times in the past, we remember, then I'm blanking on the center who's at Arizona State now, Leaf, right? Yeah, so Leaf. and then Leaf talked about like, hey, with other people in there, I had to make more of the calls. So I got on this theme of like, what does it mean to have an experienced offensive line? How much easier does that make that for the quarterback, especially since you've got 2 and 3 guys who are new to the program battling at the quarterback position? Here's Barry Odom talking about that.
Marion had mentioned the offensive line experience being a big deal in terms of how the offense flows this year, that a more experienced line is a good thing. Yeah. Can you explain why that helps the quarterbacks?
Well, I think there's a little bit of calmness in the quarterback room because of experience, and they hear the communication piece that the offensive line has working together on the different looks that we're getting defensively. And they can combo block or slide the protection and get the back in the right spot. They've been able to ease the quarterbacks into being able to focus on what they need to as well. And it's good to hear the communication. And I don't know that, with the experience we've got coming back, they're as loud of a group as I've heard in their communication piece. And that means they're confident in what they know.
I think that communication is so important, and the experience and playing together, especially from a quarterback to the line. And there was times later in my career, and I didn't, start, but I didn't start my entire career. But I was around the guys who were playing offensive line. I was around the calls. I knew the systems. I knew what we were trying to get done. And there's times where the protection that we knew, like the way it was called, like if I was making a mic call to slide the protection to what I thought was like a field smash blitz coming. And I was changing the mic to the field from the boundary. But I knew for sure that I wanted one to stay stuck. I knew this DN was going to pop, and I wanted one of my guys to stay in on this guard. I didn't want him to be, or just tackle. I didn't want him to be a free rusher. I would, do my mic call, which would get all three, the center to the left would get all moving left. But I wanted my tackle to pinch down. Being able to say that and communicate that with O-line jargon, right? Like there's a language they speak, like combo, like stack, +1. We're doing +1. That's the mic, but +1. Or this is the point on a run play. Understanding how to talk that language and get the things exactly how I wanted to, just so that when the ball was snapped, that was one less thing I had to worry about, right? That's how you get your eyes. If you're a quarterback, you get your eyes from the rush and on the routes down the field and on the coverage, is if you know the language and getting the line set pre-snap. And if your guys can communicate back to you, right? Like if I make the guy a mic, if I make the mic to the boundary and we've been making it to the field all game, and I don't get any kickback because the offensive line's like, I'm on the same page as you. I agree. I see what you see. I think this boundary pressure's coming. And then I tell this backside tackle, you're stuck. And no matter what happens, you're stuck. If your guy blitzes, he's hot. I'm hot off him. Don't worry about it. If I can say that and get that out before the snap, then it makes catching the ball and looking up at the coverage a lot easier, because I'm not like, my first look isn't like, did they know what I was saying? Did they pick up that blitz that I saw? Or did I make the right call there? It's, am I working my curl to flat, or am I going up the seam with this read? So those are like little things that quarterbacks I think can lean on. If your offensive line, one, there's some systems, and this was like in headlines with JJ McCarthy with his draft scouting, was he at Michigan, he didn't do it. He didn't do any of that stuff. He didn't have to worry about it. His offensive line handled all the protection stuff. What a luxury to have if you're JJ, but it's not always like that. But the more that the offense, the line, the quarterback, even the line from center to guard or center to tackle, if they can communicate and get things figured out the best they can, it's an amazing thing sometimes to listen to. And you talk about it a lot on defense side of communication, but there's sometimes pre-snap where you just see the offensive lineman pointing stuff out, and you hear the big burly voices coming from the front, like, no, him, and they're all on the same page. It's like it's like an orchestra to me, and it's beautiful to listen to, because as a quarterback, I'm just like, yeah, get them, guys, and that's how it feels. But to be on the same page with that stuff, it takes a load off of everybody in those situations.
On the quarterback race, nothing major to report because they did have a scrimmage. I'm watching what I'm watching. I'll give my read in a couple of minutes in practice. The Barry Odom talked about the scrimmage. Mike Romalo from the Las Vegas Sun posed basically the question, hey, what kind of mistakes did the quarterbacks make? And then Odom turned it into, well, there's a lot of things to consider when you're judging quarterbacks in practice, and especially in scrimmages.
The stat line sometimes can be misleading. If there's a tip ball that results in an interception, was that the quarterback, or did we have a breakdown in the depth of the route, the protection up front, or was it a true quarterback mistake? So I think, it would be wise for us, as we have 8 really solid practices and then the scrimmage, making sure that the opportunities that they have, they're with the same amount of quality guys at receiver and offensive line to see effectively how they run the offense. There's times I think I could be a pretty good quarterback throwing to Ricky and Jacob. So if a guy's never getting that opportunity, then that's our fault as a coaching staff.
Yeah, I've watched practice, and there's a very intentional effort to make that happen, right? To get every quarterback reps with Ricky, reps with Jacob, reps with that whole unit together, and then reps with not one of them in there. So it's like, one, it makes it interesting for those watching to try to figure out the depth chart because you don't know. You just don't know who's really the ones, what group is who. They
Right.
mix it in a lot. So you kind of get a feel for, is it the guy running the system efficiently, or is it just these guys are so good it makes you look good? And there's other layers to that, and Coach kind of touched on it there. Was like, I think the one that kind of is relatable is the tip pass that results in an interception. I think a lot of fans could look at that objectively and be like, okay, that's not his fault. Or a clear drop pass, right? You throw it to a wide open guy, it's a drop pass. You could say that's not on the quarterback. But it goes so much deeper than that when you're grading out a quarterback's performance. And going, 5 touchdown game, a high completion percentage, all that stuff is cool to look at in the box score. But there's a whole nother story that has to be told behind that. And there's 3 or something, depending on who's grading it, there's 3 or 4 different levels to each play where quarterback's getting graded. And Tom Brady kind of alluded to this before. It's the pre-snap stuff. Are you getting us into the right play before the snap? If you have the option to, are you able to say this is a bad play into this coverage? I'm not doing it. Let's get out of it. That's number 1. And in the run game, pre-snap run game stuff. Your decision making after the snap. Do you make the right read? Are you going through the right progression? Do you have the right reason for it? And there's one of the things that elevated my quarterback play to the next level was like, yeah, I could throw a pass to the open guy. But did I throw it to the open guy because I knew he was going to be open, or did I just happen to see him as the play was unfolding? Because if you rely on that as a quarterback, like I'm just going to drop back and whoever gets open is open, you're never going to complete passes at a high level, right? Like when the tighter coverages get, it's never going to work. You have to have the anticipation that this is why I'm going to throw it to that deep out. I know why. I know the coverage. I understand the route concept, and I get it. Can you articulate that? And that's what training camp is for. Every time they're watching film, I guarantee they're explaining why they made the throws. Then, of course, it's the result. Like you said, did you throw a good ball? Were you accurate with the pass? Were your mechanics in the pocket right? Did you dart between reads? Were your eyes going back and forth? There's so many things that go into each play outside of just, was it a completion or not? And I think a lot of people, was it a positive play? A lot of people, when you're talking about who should play at quarterback, you look at the results and you say, this is why. You can get fooled into making some really poor decisions with your quarterback if you're just saying he threw X amount of touchdowns and this many completions and for this many yards, and that's why. There's a lot of plays that you can go back and watch and say the quarterback had nothing to do with why that was a touchdown pass. I could have thrown that touchdown pass, as Coach Odom said. Like any guy who can throw a football could have completed that because that guy's just a dude out there and he's making all the plays. I want my quarterback to be able to make the decisions, to make the plays, make the right plays, and protect the football. And there's a lot that goes into being confident in a quarterback's ability to do that outside of, does he throw a nice spiral, right? So I appreciate to hear that from a coach. I appreciate the way I see practice structured. I appreciate the fact that I wouldn't be able to call it today as far as who the starter would be. I know I would be able to say that the gap has closed since day one, since the first couple of practices. I could say that Sluka has gotten in the playbook for sure. He's making up the deficit. He doesn't look like the new guy out there anymore. But I appreciate the process, and I appreciate seeing and understanding what it takes to grade these things out and to be as thorough as you can, because it's the most important position and you want to get it right. And there's so many things that you need to check off before you say, this is my guy.
It's a fascinating battle. It is. Because I watch Sluka at times and I'm like, man, I love the ability, the tuck and run stuff. Ooh, man, he's good. But like you said, when you're breaking it down, like, is that a good thing? Are you not seeing the field? You're not seeing the offense. So I would give a slight edge to Hajj-Malik because I think he knows the playbook. He can execute much of what they want, but you can see the upside on Sluka is there. So it's going to be great the next couple of weeks, and we'll find out more with the scrimmage this weekend, and they have tough decisions to make. Believe me, it's a good problem to have, especially considering at one point you were looking at, like, hey, we developed Jade Mayabe. He's going to be here for a couple of years, and then he's out the door. So, all right, we'll check all our Twitter accounts, also up on Facebook and Instagram. We don't drop all the nuggets here. The nuggets are out there. I was mentioning the LEL story, but there's some good stuff I want to talk about with freshmen. There's some good stuff with some of the sophomores as well who are making a lot of progress. There's a lot, man. There's a lot going on with UNLV football, and this is really cool. It's exciting with a game just a couple weeks away and such high expectations. So spread the word, UNLV Access podcast. Caleb, I appreciate it. I'll talk to you next week.